All right, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to LiNK's virtual town hall. We are so excited that you are with us tonight, or if you're in Asia this morning or in Europe very late at night, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to be joined here in a minute by two of my colleagues. I think they're on their way. But to introduce myself, I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Ian McKay, and I head up the communications at Liberty North Korea, and I've been on the team now for about 3 years, and I'm joined by two incredible colleagues. Our CEO at Liberty in North Korea, Hannah Song. Hi, Hannah. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Awesome. And Elena Lee, who is based in South Korea and heads up our resettlement programs there as the Assistant Director of Programs. Elena, are you there?
Good to be here.
So we're really excited. Today we're going to have a conversation with both Hannah and Elena to talk about the impact that coronavirus is having both on our North Korean friends and also on LiNK's work. So we'll get into kind of an update on what's going on inside North Korea from what we know, and then talk about the effect that coronavirus is having on our rescue programs and our post-resettlement programs. But before we go there, just a couple of housekeeping things. You will see a chat box to my right. If you have questions for either Elena or Hannah throughout the event, put them in there. We have some awesome moderators that are going to be chatting with you. And we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of our time together. And the second thing is, you've already noticed we had a little technical difficulty with Elena. That stuff might happen. We are on 3 different time zones in 2 different continents. And what we have found is, our expert opinion is, if you're having trouble seeing us or hearing us, the best thing to do is hit the refresh button, and we should pop right back up. And so I want to just apologize in advance if that happens, but let's get started. I hope you're excited. We're excited. There are so many people that have joined us from all over the world. It's incredible to see all of your messages that are coming in. Let's do this. So first, Hannah, I want to start with you. Could you give us kind of an update of what's going on inside North Korea and what's the impact that coronavirus is having there?
Yeah, so, before we jump into that, I just want to say thanks again to everybody that's joined us. I'm just so excited that we have so many people, like you said, Ian, from around the world that are here. So many of our supporters. I see so many familiar names and people joining us. So it's exciting to be reconnected during this time. So if we jump into it and we talk about North Korea, I think, like we all know, North Korea is a place that's oftentimes really difficult for us to know exactly what's going on inside of the country. So this situation with COVID-19 is no different. So the really interesting thing is that North Korea is actually reporting that there are 0 cases of coronavirus inside of the country. And so, I think that the challenging thing with that, however, is that it's really unclear, even if the country has the capability to diagnose people at this point with COVID. Would they even have the test? Would they have the ability to know that? And it's also a place where we know that North Korea's medical infrastructure is one of the worst in the world. And so I think that that's what makes the situation particularly concerning as well. One of the really fortunate things, though, is a few weeks ago, if you joined us, we were able to speak with some of our friends at NK News and Daily NK. And those guys are doing some of the best reporting, I think, on what's going on right now in North Korea. And so they have contacts who are on the ground inside and around North Korea. And they're analyzing North Korean state media, which frankly has actually become a really interesting source of information about how North Korea is reporting on the situation on COVID in North Korea and what exactly they're doing. So I know we have a slide here. I would definitely recommend checking out both of these sites for the best up-to-date information around what's going on.
Great. Well, you mentioned that North Korea said they have 0 cases, but isn't it true that the North Korean government has quarantined some citizens?
Yeah, so I think we're hearing cases about the North Korean government definitely, obviously, quarantining foreigners who are in the country. But there have also been reported to be over 10,000 North Korean citizens that have been placed in isolation and thousands around that have been quarantined and released already throughout the country. And of course, there are other domestic types of restrictions that are in place as well. And so it's incredibly unlikely that COVID has not made its way into North Korea. So again, I think unofficially, based off of some of these sources that we're seeing reports from, There are definitely a number of cases actually in different regions in North Korea where it definitely sounds like COVID. And so actually, according to the Daily NK, who again has sources inside the country on the ground, they've reported that in a few different regions, there have been a few dozen deaths with people with symptoms from high fever, coughing, respiratory difficulties, things that sound really similar to COVID. And again, these have been reported all around the country in a few different parts, including in Pyongyang, the capital. But again, the government is calling these cases of pneumonia. And so they continue to insist that there are 0 cases of COVID in the country.
Interesting. So then why would the North Korean government insist that there are no cases? What's the rationale behind that?
Yeah, so I think what's really, what's been interesting to see is that North Korea has never really been that transparent when it comes to these types of epidemics when they're happening inside of the country. And I have heard that some people might speculate that it's because in places like North Korea and other authoritarian systems, the government may choose to respond pretty secretively, especially because of the potential danger that the spread of this type of an infectious disease could risk, and the public's awareness of this could really risk or trigger internal unrest or systematic threats. What's interesting was, as a parallel, for example, what we saw happening even in China, for example, and I know those are conversations that are ongoing now when it comes to the credibility of information that comes from the government, and it comes to the public's awareness about what's going on and how the situation is being handled. And so, that's one of the reasons why people speculate North Korean government is insisting that there are no cases inside, even though they're taking all of these measures and there are reported cases that sound so similar to COVID like we're seeing around the world. Another really interesting thing that I would point out is actually that the North Korean government has also made it a point to report on the outbreak in South Korea. So 2 pretty interesting things that I saw about this, again, from, I think it was from some of the folks over at Daily NK. One is that the North Korean state media is really using the example of the mass outbreak that initially happened in South Korea at the Shincheonji church, if you remember that case, as an example to try to highlight and point out the problems of religion, which obviously, as we know, there is no freedom of religion in North Korea. The other thing is also that it was recently reported that in areas near the 38th parallel, near the DMZ, in some of the recent lectures, I think Daily NK folks heard from their stringers on the ground that these lectures are touting to the citizens that South Korea is trying to wage biological warfare against North Korea. And so, as some of you may know, particularly in those border areas, whether it's up by China or even down by South Korea, you have activists and groups that may try to send over things like leaflets or food and money and things like that. And so citizens in North Korea are being warned, if they're near that area, not to touch any of those things that may have come from the South, because they could potentially contract COVID from that. So it's interesting to see and to hear how the North Korean government is trying to frame up some of these things right now.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's interesting to see how they're taking advantage of this for their own propaganda and to continue isolating the North Korean people by telling them not to pick up pamphlets or information that comes over the border.
Right.
So that's the North Korean government's response. What about the international response for the North Korean people? Has there been any international aid, and has North Korea received any support yet?
Yeah, so what I understand is that the International Red Cross did receive an exemption from sanctions. As we know, obviously, there are a number of sanctions that are in place, and that has potentially made it difficult for international aid to get into the country. And so the International Red Cross did receive an exemption on sanctions in late February to deliver equipment and things that are needed for these kind of preventative measures, and obviously for this potential outbreak. But it seems like, I think these supplies should be arriving by the end of the month. And then I think other organizations like UNICEF and Doctors Without Borders may also potentially be sending in some medical supplies and aid, but the timing of that, it seems like, is a little bit uncertain at this point.
Okay, that's good to know. We're hearing from Daily NK, we're hearing the official reports from the North Korean news outlets and the North Korean government. But what have North Korean refugees who have made it to South Korea and have been able to be in contact with their families. Do we know anything from them? Have they talked to their families, and what are their families telling them from inside the country?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things has been, as we may already know, many North Korean defectors are able to be in contact with some of their family members in North Korea. And that's thanks to, these kind of broker networks where they can smuggle in these Chinese cell phones. And if they're close enough to the border, can find ways to connect and speak to family members inside. Since COVID-19's gone down over the last few months, we have heard from some of our North Korean friends in South Korea that they have been able to be in touch with their family inside. And it sounds like their family members are incredibly concerned about them, again, because the North Korean government has made it a point to report on this massive outbreak in South Korea. And so family members inside were expressing a lot of concern about the safety of North Koreans in South Korea due to the outbreak. And then again, what we're hearing also from family members is that they are being impacted because of the complete shutdown on the borders. And so there's been an impact on things like trade and food and products that were previously able to come into the country much easier before, and how that's impacting markets and things like that inside North Korea as well.
So you talked about shutting down borders there and the effect it's having on the markets, but crossing the border is something that North Korean refugees have to do if they want to escape the country and reach safety. So what impact has the closure of the border between China and North Korea had on LiNK's rescue work and helping North Korean refugees reach freedom?
Yeah, so we shared this update a few weeks ago or last month with our supporters, and we were able to conduct one rescue mission at the very start of this year before sort of everything started to happen, especially in China. But then as the coronavirus really began to spread in China, the government began really strict lockdowns, and that was around late January. And so with the increased security to restrict travel, and especially in certain areas that are around where that were hardest hit by the virus, that obviously impacted our ability to be able to continue our rescue work. And so we did have a mission actually en route in January while these types of travel restrictions were being put on hold. And unfortunately, those folks were not able to continue moving, and we have them at a safe house until we can actually begin moving people through China again. We are regularly in contact with them. They're with our partners. They're safe and doing well for now. But of course, there's always the continued concern about the security situation. There are a lot more checkups, security in place because of just generally the Chinese government wanting to try to restrict all of these issues with the coronavirus. And so, the reality though is that since early January, since that last rescue mission, there's been no movement, no rescue missions possible through any of our networks or any of our rescue routes.
So I guess the question on my mind, and probably a lot of people's mind then, is when do you expect rescue missions to resume? We're hearing that China might be opening a little bit, but yeah, what have you heard from our partners on the ground there?
Yeah, so I'm sure many people saw in the news recently that travel restrictions have started to lift in Wuhan and in certain areas in China recently in recent weeks. But even though some of those travel restrictions are loosening, the reality is we not only move people throughout China, but also into Southeast Asia. And so many of the borders continue to still be shut down. And so that continues to be a concern and an issue for us in terms of being able to restart rescue missions. We are very hopeful, though, that we will begin to resume rescue missions sometime in the coming weeks, but it's just impossible for us to know when exactly for sure. We're keeping our eyes and ears open. Our partners and our field team, they're on the ground in the interim, continuously conducting reconnaissance missions, checking out various pickup areas and routes to see how things may have changed or been affected over these last few months as a result of everything that's been happening. And so as soon as we're able to start moving, our team is on the ground. We're ready to go. One concern I do have is that it's likely that there will be a flood of requests that come in from people who have been waiting to move over these last few months. They've either been trapped in China and are waiting, or they will be desperate to leave North Korea and will have just crossed the border. And so 2 points of reference for that is a few years ago when there was a huge typhoon in North Korea, we had a similar experience where as a result of that typhoon, we got a flood of requests from people needing help to escape during that crisis. And then again, if we look back to last year in the first quarter of the year, just as a point of comparison, we had actually rescued 81 people at the start of last year, as compared to this year where we've only been able to do one rescue mission. And so you can imagine how many people are probably eager and are waiting to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, it will be great to hear, hopefully in the coming weeks that our rescue routes are continue to, open, and I'm sure you'll update us and all the supporters around the world that
absolutely
we're going to start. So thank you so much, Hannah. We'll be able to come back and ask Hannah some questions at the end. So if you have questions for Hannah, feel free to put them in our chat, and we'll be collecting those questions, and we'll be trying to answer as many as we can at the end. Our awesome moderators, Marie and Sarah, are in there as well, so they'll be able to take some of the questions that we don't get to. If you are just joining us, welcome. We're so excited you're spending some time with us tonight or this morning or wherever you are in the world. And just a reminder, if you are having technical difficulties, we are not IT specialists. So our recommendation is to hit the refresh button, and hopefully we'll pop right back up and we can continue having a great time together. I want to move on to talk to Elena. Elena, are you there?
Yes. I'm here.
Okay, can hear me? Great. So, Elena, we've talked to Hannah about North Korea and what's happening in China, but with you, really want to hear what's going on with some of our post-resettlement work. And so, before we get there, I would really just be interested in hearing, could you tell everyone your LiNK story, how you came to care about the North Korean people and work at Liberty in North Korea?
Yeah, just to share my abridged LiNK story. My parents immigrated to Costa Rica, where I was born and raised. So since young, I was always very curious about my Korean heritage, partly because a lot of people asked me whether I was from South Korea or North Korea. And so understanding why there were two Koreas became very important to me, because I felt like I needed to know in order to understand myself and my background. And I think naturally I developed a particular interest in North Korea. Later, when I went to college, a friend who was the co-president of the LiNK rescue team, Pen for LiNK, he invited me to get involved. So I did. And once I joined the team for the first time, I was exposed to so many amazing stories of the North Korean people and just how incredible they are. And I think just hearing about how they had been actively driving change bottoms up was just so inspiring. And so I think I just decided then that I wanted to do something more after college. And so I jumped at the opportunity to join the LiNK team, 2 jobs in 2 countries later in 2016.
Great. Well, hey, thanks so much for telling us your LiNK story. That's something that we like to do at LiNK, to introduce new people. So from Costa Rica to Pennsylvania to now Seoul, we're so glad you're on our team. And so, you're in Seoul, South Korea. So maybe we could just start by updating us. What's the situation like there? I know that coronavirus arrived in South Korea a little bit earlier than other places, but it seems like things have kind of calmed down and settled into a routine. Can you give us a quick update of how it is in Seoul?
The situation has definitely calmed down since late February, when we were seeing the peak of the number of confirmed coronavirus cases in South Korea. I think the government has done a great job to be able to control that massive outbreak. However, we're still seeing smaller outbreaks here and there, so a lot of us are still staying home and practicing social distancing as recommended by the government.
Great. Yeah. Well, yeah, it would be interesting to see, as the curve continues to flatten, the impact that has. So continue to stay safe and tell our North Korean friends as well. I do want to ask you, though, you work with resettlement and North Korean refugees who are arriving to South Korea. So kind of what's been going on in terms of the number of North Koreans arriving and resettling in South Korea? Hannah just told us about the situation in China and how that's led to shutting down rescue routes. So how's that impacted the numbers of North Koreans arriving?
It's been reported that 135 North Koreans have arrived in South Korea in the first quarter of this year. And that's definitely a decrease when you compare it with 229 North Koreans who had arrived in South Korea the first quarter of last year. I wanted to add that out of the 135 who made it to South Korea this year, 23 North Koreans arrived through LiNK.
Wow, that's a lot for the overall. But I also wonder, 135 still seems like a lot given that China was shut down for so long, starting in January. How did these refugees escape China?
It is likely that most of these recent arrivals actually escaped China late last year or early in January, before many Chinese cities went under lockdown and the government increased its surveillance efforts. Once they cross over to Southeast Asia, it actually takes around 5 to 6 weeks to be processed. And so due to this delay, maybe the numbers may seem a little high. Some North Koreans may have been able to escape more recently, but due to the current circumstances, it can be assumed that it's very dangerous right now for anyone to be moving at all in China at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay, that helps explain that number then a little better. We talk a lot about our rescue routes and how, we help people move through secret rescue routes to Southeast Asia where they can reach freedom and seek safety and asylum in South Korea. Mm-hmm. But can you walk us through what typically happens once a South Korean reaches South Korea, when they land at Incheon Airport in Seoul? What's the process like for them?
So typically, when a North Korean arrives in South Korea, they are first questioned by South Korean authorities at the National Intelligence Service. It's a way for the authorities to run a background check on them and really check that they're actually from North Korea and they're refugees. It's also a way for the government to gain intelligence and just know what's happening in North Korea through the refugees' their testimonies and stories. This process can take up to 3 months. Then they're transferred to a government resettlement agency called Hanawon, where they received psychological and health checkups and learn about South Korea society and history and culture. This takes another 3 months. Actually, as part of their education in Hanawon, they not only receive lectures, but they actually get to go out for a few days. They get to do things like one-day volunteering. They go visit colleges. They go out to buy essentials. They do receive job training sometimes, and they do get to also meet religious leaders and visit some facilities related to that. And as part of the program, they also do go out to sightsee and get to know Seoul. And after completing all this, 3 months of Hanawon, then they are allowed to finally leave the facility and settle into their government-provided houses all over the country.
Oh, wow. So then if they're, they go through this really intensive training program at Hanawon, show up to their new home around South Korea, are they just on their own once they arrive at their new home?
No, once they're settled in, then they're actually required to take classes at a local resettlement center called Hana Center. And that center provides more practical and customized training, including an orientation of their neighborhood. This training typically takes up to 8 days. Then they're able to start their new lives. I think it's an incredible thing. It took them about 7 months to get to this point, but only then they can really go off and do what they want to do. Many continue on to receive job training. They do find part-time work or explore their options as they consider pursuing higher education. The resettlement journey looks very different for every person because it really depends on their priorities and what their hopes and dreams are for themselves and their families.
Got it. Okay, so then if that typical 7-month processing period is the typical way that it's done, what impact is this pandemic having on the resettlement process for North Korean refugees?
Actually, since the start of the epidemic, we haven't heard much about changes in their experience at the National Intelligence Service, but we do know that it has definitely affected everything after that. North Koreans who are currently inside Hanawon are completely isolated. That means that they're not allowing any visitors, volunteers, medical volunteers, even family members. This isolation also means that they cannot leave the facilities, and all the trips that I mentioned before, the volunteering, checking out college campuses, all these activities have also been canceled. when it comes to the local resettlement centers, those are also closed as well. So North Koreans who have recently graduated from Hanawan are actually not getting these the crucial lessons that are meant to help them get situated as they finally move into their homes and begin their new lives. This is especially problematic for those who have come to South Korea alone, and they don't really know anyone who they can trust, and they don't really have a strong social support system and no one to really step up to fill in this gap.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. I just think about my own life, and probably a lot of the experiences that people that are joining this event are feeling is, in this time of isolation, it is lonely, but I do have friends and family that I can hop on a FaceTime call with, that I can text with immediately. But for many North Korean refugees, that just simply isn't the case. They don't have close family or friends in South Korea, and can't easily contact their loved ones in North Korea. So what's the impact for our North Korean friends? Have you talked to any of them that are trying to navigate this new reality?
This new reality is definitely something that is hard to, I think it's very surreal for us. So I can imagine that it's also very surreal for them. Like even in normal circumstances, resettling in South Korea is already so daunting. Among the many challenges that North Koreans face, one that particularly actually resonates with me nowadays is loneliness. For us, being isolated from loved ones is not normal. But many of us have started to find creative ways to stay connected with family and friends, in some ways as a way to cope with the current crisis. But unfortunately, most North Korean refugees cannot routinely communicate with their loved ones, even in normal circumstances. And they do not know if they're doing well, if they're healthy. And so I can't imagine what new kind of loneliness they're facing now as they have to self-isolate and be careful to go out and stay safe. Just to share a story, I once called a friend.
Go for it.
Yeah, I once called a friend who came to South Korea alone 2 years prior to wish him a happy birthday. And he was on his way home after a long day of work. And so when he picked up, I just went ahead and wished him a happy birthday. And for a second, he was quiet. And I wasn't sure how to react because I didn't expect him to be quiet. I was even wondering if I'd lost him there. But before I could act or say something, he proceeded to thank me for remembering his birthday and not letting this special day go unnoticed. He shared with me that he was not planning to celebrate at all because he found himself alone, unlike last year when he had friends, at least friends to celebrate with. He told me that he had actually mentally prepared himself to just get through the day, just like any other day. A call that I thought would be quite simple turned into something more meaningful, perhaps a reminder to him that he is not alone, and that he mattered to not only me, but all of us at LiNK, and really every person who is part of this movement. I remember feeling quite emotional when he thanked me like that, because I think I was expecting to say things like, "Congratulations, this is your second birthday in freedom. That's amazing. I'm so glad you're here." But that's not really how it works. I think, at least for me, it served as like a stark reminder that many people really do feel lonely, especially on special occasions like birthdays. And in some ways, they get reminded of all the loved ones they miss and how much they wish to be surrounded by them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right on it. So you said it right. You can't imagine how lonely it is. So if loneliness is already a challenge in normal circumstances, what are some of our North Korean friends saying about the current situation with self-isolation and self-distancing?
The current situation totally exacerbated some of these challenges. One of our North Korean friends recently shared with us that she actually feels really scared to go out because she doesn't know how to use public transportation. And that's something that she would have asked for help at the local resettlement center if it was open. Not exactly knowing what to do other than just stay put, stay at home, and wait until someone checks up on you is what many of our friends are going through and experiencing at the moment. And so I think it's like that kind of like challenge in some ways is just it's a challenge that we see a lot of our friends really. This is like really common because some say that trying to adjust to South Korea is just really difficult. Like starting with the most basic things to do to be able to just adapt and live here in South Korea. But with the current situation, all of that they're just not getting support for any of that. And I think these are the moments that really show how important our post-resettlement work is. Our work goes beyond providing certain benefits or services. We gladly step up to become their family, friend, coach, their student, their neighbor even, and we become and we are a part of their life as much as they become a part of ours. And we feel incredibly honored and happy to have that opportunity.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned our resettlement work, because I actually do want to transition to that, because I don't think a lot of people know exactly what our resettlement work looks like in South Korea. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, what would it have been like for a North Korean refugee to be part of our post-resettlement program last year versus the start of this year? What does a normal process look like versus what's happening now?
We provide a lot of support in the first year of resettlement because that first year can be quite overwhelming. Having to leave everything they've known behind, like everything, and then to start all over. And not only that, to make continuous efforts to adapt to an extremely fast-paced, always changing, hyper-competitive society like South Korea is quite challenging. But in addition to that, many North Koreans have also lived through and been exposed to so much trauma and traumatic events, experiences in North Korea and in China. I think a lot of you guys may know that a lot of women, for instance, have been trafficked in China, and a lot of them have been sold as brides or forced to work at a brothel. A lot of women are also coping with the pain of having to leave loved ones behind for their safety, so the pain of separation with family. All these dreadful experiences are what many people have to cope with post-resettlement. So what we have found is that there's a need to empower North Korean refugees early in their resettlement in light of their traumatic experiences.
Interesting. So then how do you and your team empower refugees?
We focus specifically on building their self-efficacy or their belief that they can accomplish their goals, because self-efficacy is necessary to overcome both all the initial challenges of resettlement, but also the stress related to trauma. Empowering them in this way will translate to greater resiliency and success in the years to come.
I see. So then if you're empowering North Koreans in their self-efficacy, how are you building that self-efficacy? What does that look like practically?
So we do a lot of different initiatives for that. So we build self-efficacy by first focusing on welcoming newly resettled North Koreans in their new homes and encouraging them to set and pursue their short and long-term goals. We also run workshops that teach about problem solving and prioritizing their needs. These workshops are actually really important because, especially in that first year, everything seems very important and urgent and needs to be taken care of, immediately. But what we help them do is to classify their needs and be able to discern which ones are actually important and which ones could wait, and which ones turned out to be not that important after all. So those are the types of workshops that we run. We also organize volunteering opportunities, which is a great way to help develop a positive sense of identity. And I think it's also a great way to, in some ways, show them that they are contributing members of this society. We host large gatherings to help them connect with other North Koreans who have resettled more than a year ago. These North Koreans serve as role models who understand the challenges firsthand and can give the best advice to newly resettled North Koreans.
Awesome. Yeah. This is a side note, but you mentioned gatherings. I got a chance to go to one last year, and honestly, one of the highlights of my time working at LiNK. The best way to describe these gatherings, I think there's about 50 of our North Korean friends there. It felt like a family reunion. You had like young kids playing soccer. You had the older, moms and grandmas, talking and catching up. And so it really feels like a community, and you can definitely tell that people are there to support and encourage each other. So it's just really, sad to know that isn't possible right now with the current reality. But how is your team adapting to this? And how are you continuing to support North Koreans even when you can't meet them in person right now?
Well, this year we've definitely had to improvise, and everything we do actually we have to do it in person. But given the current circumstances, we have to change it up and try to do everything online virtually. So, for instance, instead of welcoming North Koreans in person and visiting them in their new homes, we have resorted to doing virtual welcoming and housewarming calls. And so, some of our friends they've adapted and enjoyed actually this new initiative, and so they'll take around their phones and they'll show us their house and some of the things that they value. So it's been interesting. It's been fun actually to do that. Instead of hosting those gatherings that you just mentioned about, we decided to attempt to go live and host a virtual one. So what our team did is we invited all our North Korean friends to tune in and engage with us. In some ways, like the way we're doing right now, just engage with us with other North Koreans in real time. We've been able to run some workshops online, which they were focused on goal setting. So thankfully, as a result, many North Koreans have been able to set goals despite the current situation, and are looking forward to accomplishing them one by one. And more than ever before, we've stepped up our check-in calls. We're trying to call all our friends more regularly to ensure that they're doing okay, that they're doing well. And I'm glad to say that as far as we're aware, all of our friends are safe and healthy.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what have our North Korean friends, how have they been responding to this when, our resettlement team is talking to them? What are they hearing from our North Korean friends about it?
I think many understand. Many understand that what we're going through is not normal, but I think it's trying to understand and then actually living through it. I think it's a little different. Because if you think about it, so many people have waited for so long to live a new life in freedom, and but now they're told to stay home and wait indefinitely, and told that we don't know when normal will be back. So in some ways they have to delay their pursuing their hopes, their dreams for themselves and their families because of COVID, and I'm sure that this uncertainty is quite discouraging and sometimes disempowering for others too. For other North Koreans, I can imagine that they are worried about their family and friends in China and North Korea. As sending money into North Korea or getting in touch with family members was always very difficult. But it's more so now than before because of increased restrictions in North Korea and in China. And I'm sure that a lot of people are wondering if their families are safe in North Korea given the situation. We've also heard North Koreans, some of our friends actually been laid off, and others have seen their businesses get hurt as a result of COVID. So actually, I think in many ways, many share the same type of anxieties and fears that we all feel. But I'm happy to also share though that many North Koreans have reacted positively to the situation. Actually, one friend, she shared with us that she's worked hard she worked hard all her life, so hard, and that also included risking everything to come to South Korea, that she decided to take this situation, this period, as a time to rest. And I think it might even be the first time that she's taking a break for so long like this and focusing on herself. Another North Korean friend has decided to use her spare time and energy to make those beautiful masks for others. She actually,
nice.
aren't they beautiful? She actually sent about like 100 masks to the office actually, and because she wanted to make sure that we were safe and we were protected. So she's so nice of her. And so a staffer actually sent her flowers to show her, to show our appreciation. And so she placed those flowers near the frame that contains a picture of our staff with the encouraging messages that we had written for her as a welcoming gift. Just as a side, we prepared these frames, these pictures, and we write encouraging notes for every newly resettled North Korean. And I think in some ways we just want to remind them that they do have a family here in South Korea, always rooting for them.
That's so cool. And those masks, those are awesome.
Yeah.
I think you might need to send some to us in the US. We could use some, that's for sure. I would definitely sport one of those masks. I want to ask you a quick question. I've seen online on some of our South Korean channels that you guys are kind of spearheading this new initiative called Y5s. Can you tell us a little bit about Y5s?
Well, we had actually had asked some of our friends if they were down to write messages of support in light of COVID-19 to be shared publicly and encourage others. So that was the campaign. And so here I show you a few examples. One says, "Together we will overcome COVID-19. High five and fighting." And the other says, "The coronavirus crisis is like the clouds. Clouds have to pass in order for us to see the light. The crisis will soon pass, so let's hold on a little longer." And I actually wanted to share another one, which is not pictured here, which said, "Although our physical bodies are limited to stay inside, the freedom that our hearts can experience is limitless." And these are just some of the examples really that show us that many North Koreans are actually extremely positive and resilient. And I personally know for a fact that nothing, not even a pandemic, will dampen their spirit and deter them from enjoying the freedom that they fought so hard and made so many sacrifices to get. I'm looking forward to meeting our North Korean friends regularly again under more normal circumstances after we've just all collectively overcome the current crisis.
Awesome. Hey, Elena, thank you so much for giving us an update. It was great. It was great to see some visuals and hear that, we're adapting in South Korea. So thanks so much.
Happy to do so.
All right, well, stick around because there might be some questions for you. We're going to go back to Hannah for a couple more questions just about what's happening at LiNK as an organization. But as a reminder, if you have questions for either Hannah or Elena about our rescue programs, about our resettlement work, put them in the chat. We are going to be answering them. We are running a little behind schedule, but we're still going to stick around to make sure that we answer some questions. That's really important to us. So I do want to go back to you, Hannah. Let's wrap it up here before we go to some open Q&A and talk about what's the impact that coronavirus is having on Liberty North Korea as an organization.
Yeah, so I wanted to just share that, before COVID and everything, I think we had an incredible momentum that was going as an organization. Internally, we had been talking about a 10-year vision. We've been talking about where we're going, not just as an organization, but really on this issue. And I think we were pretty excited about that growth and that opportunity, growing our programs and of course, our movement and our fundraising. But of course, because of everything that's been happening, my main priority over the last month has really had to pivot. And instead of being able to really focus on the growth of the organization, now we're trying to focus more on the sustainability of the organization. First and foremost, our priority for LiNK is to ensure that our programs are funded, that we can continue rescuing refugees, and that we can continue to support them in their resettlement. I think the toughest thing right now, and again, just like so many organizations and so many other individuals, is that there's just so much uncertainty. So we don't really know what the true long-term financial impact is going to be on everything. And I think one of the hardest things is we don't want to make any rash decisions now out of fear that could really have a long-term impact or implication on our programs. Or really upend our ability to make important decisions once things do stabilize. In addition to that, we work with, honestly, an incredible team. We have some of the best people that we work with in the office and on the ground. I'm not just saying that because you guys are here. I think you know that. We love the people we work with, and they are so smart and talented and hardworking. And we want to prioritize and do everything we can to make sure that we can retain our staff, especially during such a difficult time like this. And so we're taking every advantage of every opportunity that we can right now, again, to try to have the least impact on our ability to continue running our programs. That is the most important thing to us right now.
Definitely. And, programs priority, definitely. How is LiNK's executive leadership team kind of preparing for the eventuality that maybe this is going to be a long-term economic downturn? How are we preparing for that?
Yeah, I think, like so many other people in this position, so many other organizations, we've done our best to try to create multiple contingency budgets for different scenarios, depending on, the reality is we know that our supporters are potentially being impacted. And for those who are not, it's been we've been so encouraged because they've been calling, they've been emailing, they've been increasing their monthly giving. I mean, that's been so encouraging, saying, hey, we're not being impacted and we want to make sure you guys continue to be supported. That has just been such an inspiration for us and just such an encouragement. And then of course, there are those who are in really difficult positions and situations, and they're calling too and having to put their giving on hold and their monthly giving as well. And so we are being impacted by that. You know, in the first quarter of this year, we did fall about 20% below our fundraising goal. And a lot of that happened in March because of COVID. And we're planning for a potential downturn for the rest of this year as well in terms of how that could affect us, knowing that, you know, people may not know the exact circumstance of their situation for a few more months here. So, you know, another big unknown for us is we do large fundraising events in the fall, our galas, and that usually raises about 15 to 20% of our annual revenue. So that's a lot of money that we raise in the fall, and we're not even sure if we'll be moving forward with those events. So, you know, that being said, again, we're doing everything that we can. We're operating currently at about 25% below our typical budget. We've tried to apply for relief through the recent CARES Act, looking for different grants we can apply for, things like that. So again, because we don't know where things are going to be in the next 6 to 9 months, our biggest challenge right now is trying to be really wise and not making these rash decisions that will that could impact us. And so we want to make sure that our programs can continue to thrive, not just through this year, but, you know, ongoing as well. You know, I think the last thing I'll just say is that our team, we are so determined. We're so determined to be more creative than ever in how we're responding to this. To be honest, I've been inspired by you guys, you know, Elena, Ian. I think our team all around the world in our offices, just the way our team has responded has been a huge inspiration and encouragement to me and to the leadership team, because I think instead of seeing what's been going on as a crisis, I think everyone's been brainstorming and coming up with some incredible ways for how, you know, we can see this as an opportunity to try new things virtually, whether it's with our North Korean friends and how we do resettlement, or it's with our supporters and things like that. To be honest, I'm just really encouraged even just by the people who have joined us here today. I mean, how cool is this? Because this isn't something that we would have typically done. And so I really, really appreciate that. I can't tell all of you who are tuning in how awesome and how grateful we are for that support. It makes such a difference to us, and we're really grateful that you continue to stand by us and the North Korean people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think something that I found myself doing is, if I'm feeling down, if it's a hard day, I go and look at LiNK's Instagram comments, and there's just so many incredible people out there who still want to support the North Korean people, still stand with our North Korean friends. And to me, that's just inspiring. So yeah, thanks so much, Hannah, for that update. We're going to go to Q&A in just a second. I just want to tell you about a really fun event that we're going to be doing next week, Thursday. We are going to be cooking North Korean food live with our North Korean friend, Jessie Kim. Jessie Kim runs a business in South Korea, teaching South Koreans how to make North Korean cuisine. And she's been so kind to lead a live virtual cooking class with us next Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we will actually send you an exclusive early access to that event tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that, but I want you to know about it. We'll also be including the ingredient list. So if you want to follow along and cook with Jessie, make sure to spend this weekend braving it in a grocery store to get the ingredients. I guarantee it's worth it. These snacks are so good. All right, enough of my questions. Let's move on to questions from people who have joined us. I want to start, let's see. Oh man, there are so many good questions here. Let's start with this. Elena, I think this is going to be for you. Crystal is wondering, is access to healthcare inclusive in a North Korean resettlement to South Korea?
Yes, the government does provide insurance, and so they are basically covered for most of their health needs for the first 5 years of the resettlement. And so, yes, that's my short answer.
Awesome.
So they're able to just
Short
get
and
medicine.
sweet.
Yeah, they just go to the doctor and get prescriptions and are able to really access the healthcare system in South Korea, which is phenomenal.
All right, great. Thanks for that. Let's see. Rachel is asking, we kind of covered this, but maybe it'd be great just to reiterate it once. But Rachel asks, how do families in South Korea get in touch with their families in North Korea? How do North Koreans that are in South Korea get in touch with their families in North Korea? And has coronavirus impacted their ability to get in touch with family?
So
maybe Hannah?
Oh,
or Hannah or Elena, whoever
Elena,
wants to
go for
take
it.
Oh, okay. I think Hannah did mention a little bit that there's actually a brokerage network that they could use to be able to in some ways facilitate these phone calls. If people are able to actually smuggle, if some families are able to smuggle in Chinese phones, then they're able to use that, but they have to be near the border to be able to secure some network and be able to call their loved ones. But it is actually a logistical, like a whole endeavor, because you have to coordinate the specific time that they're going to call, because again, you have to be at a region where you can get reception. But with North Korea and the current situation happening inside the country, there's a lot of restrictions, especially with movement. And so if a lot of people can't really move, especially closer to the border where they can catch the signals or like even talk with a broker and see if they can arrange these phone calls, then none of that is happening right now. And so that's the current situation that has been exacerbated by COVID.
All right, thanks for that. I'm just filtering through so many questions. There's so many great ones. I think this is an important one for Hannah to answer. Britt is asking, is China still repatriating North Koreans with the border closed? What do we know about that?
So we don't know anything definitively at this point. I mean, the main thing has been, at least through our network and through our folks on the ground, there hasn't been any movement, and the border, over the previous few months was completely closed. And so from what I have heard, that would include as well sending any people back into North Korea. But again, I think the focus has really shifted, even in terms of the Chinese government's resources over the last few months, in terms of trying to deal with this pandemic. And so we have not heard of those cases, any recent cases of repatriation in the recent months. But again, as travel restrictions lift and things begin to normalize again, I imagine those types of things will probably resume as well.
All right. Xiao Chen is asking, and this is probably for Hannah too, how do North Koreans get in touch with LiNK if they want to escape? What if they have no connections in China?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so if North Koreans want to escape, if they're looking for a way out, we typically work or operate off of a referral basis. And so we are so fortunate that we've been able to help over 1,200 individuals escape safely, over the years that we've done this rescue work. Many of our referrals come from family members and people that we've helped, asking us if we can help their family or their friends, and they'll put us directly in touch with them. Sometimes we'll be in touch with them even when they're still in North Korea. And again, it's through that network Elena mentioned, where the family members will coordinate what it takes to get out. And as soon as they make it into China, they'll connect with our network and we'll be able to help them to come out. If they don't have a family member or someone that can refer us to, we also do have some folks who are on the ground in China. We have a few trusted networks that we do receive referrals from as well. And so if they're somehow able to get in touch with one of these other networks or one of these individuals on the ground, we may be able to receive a referral from them too. But the referral network is very important for us. It's a critical security step that we put in, a buffer that we put in place to protect our network, as well as the people that do the work in the underground, and also to protect us. It's a natural part of our security process and our vetting process too.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much for some more insight. I think that's always something that people like to ask. They ask me a lot, and so I'm glad that we could cover that here. Chris asked a question. I think it's actually a great question, and this is probably going to make my life busier, but I'd be excited about it. Is there a way to communicate with North Korean refugees virtually? Is there any way for LiNK to start a pen pal program, or is there a virtual pen pal that would help alleviate the loneliness? Elena, is there a current opportunity for people to communicate virtually?
Currently, that we don't have those kind of opportunities. I think it could be a possibility. But I think one of the things I did want to explain a little bit is in some ways the challenges of why North Koreans can't really use the internet or really connect with others through these types of mediums. It's actually security. A lot of them are just scared to expose themselves, scared to leave a footprint online. They're scared that in some ways that the North Korean regime will find out that they're here in South Korea. And in some ways, then the consequences will be felt by the family members or friends back in North Korea. And so there's always that concern, the security concern, that does in some ways impede and in some ways be a big barrier for them to do this kind of initiatives. But I do want to, though, I don't want to say it can never happen. I think it's possible, and we can definitely find ways to do it. Like the Wi-Fi campaign, where they didn't really expose your faces, but they still use, they still took pictures of their handwriting, their post-it notes, their hands. So I think we can definitely find creative ways to do that and be able to form friendships virtually.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's one of the challenges of working on the North Korea issue, right? Is that we have to really respect people's security and privacy as it pertains to their identities. But, I think personally there could be a really cool way for us to, even if it's just setting up a way for people to send encouraging messages from the United States over to your team that they can share when they have an opportunity. I think that'd be awesome. So Chris, thanks so much for that idea. I'm going to look into it tomorrow. Let's see. I have a couple more questions. Carly's asking, this question is for Hannah. In terms of funding, what are LiNK's rules for accepting money? Would brand or company collaborations be possible, to improve our financial sustainability?
Rules on taking funding, I think it just really depends. There's no real hard and fast rules, to be honest. We're very open. Obviously, fundraising is so important for us, making sure that we secure support that we need so our programs can continue. And so we're very open to working with companies, with corporations. I think, in fact, one of the challenges is just that sometimes companies and corporations here in North Korea, and they run for the hills. And so I think when we have an opportunity to introduce the issue to them via the lens of the resettlement work or the refugee issue or even the trafficking issue, there is an opportunity for us to try to find the right partnerships, especially with corporations or companies that have CSR, corporate social responsibility type departments, and funding for some of that kind of stuff. And so if anyone's in South Korea, I know there's a lot of companies there that do a lot of CSR. Same here in the US. If that's something that you are familiar with doing, please reach out, let us know. We are very open to opportunities for ways that we can sustain and find funding for our programs.
Awesome. And I think you kind of are, this is a natural segment into the last question, which we've had so many questions like this. People are wondering, how can we show support to North Koreans or liberating North Korea during this pandemic? What can people do? Yeah,
so I think the easiest thing to do, there's probably three things to do. I would say be a donor, a fundraiser, and an advocate. And so what does that mean? If you have the ability to, make a donation, to make a gift, if you are already, thank you so much for that. If you don't have the ability to do that, to start a fundraiser, to use that as an opportunity to fundraise, whether that's on our platform or on Facebook or anywhere else, it's a great way to not only engage your community and your friends and family, but it's also a way to just talk to them about this issue. As we all know, there's still a huge narrative problem when it comes to North Korea. And so the third thing is be an advocate. One of the easiest things that you can do is to share the stories of the North Korean people. Again, I think that unfortunately, so many people still are familiar with North Korea and it being defined by Kim Jong-un and nuclear weapons and politics. And we have a lot of work still to do in terms of trying to change that narrative. And so if you see one of our YouTube videos or hear one of the stories, so many of you guys know Joseph and Jesse, and there's TED Talks and books. There's so much content and things that we can be sharing during this time right now. Please, as an advocate, promote these stories and help people to familiarize themselves with a new way to sort of redefine North Korea by its people rather than the politics. And again, I want to just say, beyond that, I know there's a lot of questions we probably didn't get to, but I can't tell you how exciting it was to just kind of browse through the chat and to just see the enthusiasm. Again, it's just so exciting to see all of your just enthusiasm and again, just to take the time to be here with us tonight because you care about the North Korean people, you care about LiNK. I can't tell you how much that means to us, to me, to our team, and to the North Koreans that we work with, that in the midst of this crazy pandemic, that you guys remember the North Korean people and what they're also going through. And the fact that this work has to continue. We have to continue to be there to support North Koreans who need to escape, who want to escape, who are beginning new lives. There's so much more work for us to do, and we wouldn't be able to do that without all of you and this just amazing movement of supporters literally around the world. It's so exciting to see you guys tuning in from all different places in the world. Thank you guys so much for that. And if you have more ideas, creative things that you're doing, share them with us, please. We want to promote what you're doing and show our supporters what you're doing, and we want to know what you're doing too. The last thing I will say is that, as I had mentioned, we are anticipating that there is going to be probably a lot of requests that are going to come in once we begin our rescue missions again. We're gearing up here to launch an emergency rescue campaign because we don't have the funds that we would need if we were to get a flood of requests to be able to help North Korean refugees immediately. And that is our priority. And so I wanted to give all of you a heads up that that's coming your way. And so whether that's you donating, that's you helping us to push that out there, it's you setting up a fundraising page, or again, helping us to really spread awareness and advocate for the North Korean people and the situation they're in. All of that helps tremendously. And so we just want to thank you guys again so much for that.
Great. Okay. Hannah and Elena, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me today and to talk to all of our incredible supporters around the world tonight. It's been awesome just to hear your insights and just know, that there is hope, right? Things will change and that we will be ready for it and we're going to respond with the kind of resilience that LiNK has always had. So thank you so much for joining us. When this webinar ends, it's going to take you directly to a YouTube video, and it's actually a 3-part series called The Escape. That really gives you, it's a mini documentary that we made last year where we went back with Jessie Kim, our North Korean friend, and found the very place that she crossed into freedom. And so it's a 3-part series that follows where she crossed into freedom, and then also is full circle and kind of covers some of that post-resettlement stuff that Elena was talking about, where we go to her house in South Korea and see what her life is like in South Korea. So when this event ends, it's going to take you directly there. So don't be surprised when YouTube pops up. But from all of us at Liberty in North Korea, just want to say thank you so much for joining us today and for continuing to support and stand with the North Korean people. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will hopefully see you next week at our next event. Have a great night. Thanks.